Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Spotlight with Scientists in School. Today, I am so excited to be having a conversation with Dr. Supriya Sharma. She is the Chief Medical Advisor for Health Canada, and her role is approving vaccines for Canadians. She chats with us about that approval process and also what this job means to her personally. Supriya joins us from our nation's capital. Let's head on over and join the conversation. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Spotlight with Scientists in School. I'm thrilled today to be having a conversation with Chief Medical Advisor for Health Canada, Dr. Supriya Sharma. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Betty.
Hi. I should let everybody know that you and I go way, way back, decades ago, as the two of us were undergrads at McMaster University.
Absolutely. And who knew, like all these years later, that we'd be sitting here talking about science and COVID.
I know, it's crazy. My girls are grown up and they can't wait for us to stop talking about COVID and the pandemic, but it's here for a while. So I thought this would be a perfect time to have a conversation. But first, you know what, Supriya? I want to know what got you interested in science. I'm always curious to know everybody's journey. What got you excited when you were little?
Well, science just made sense to me. I think I was always really, curious about things, and science just sort of was a way to explain the world. And it was a pathway to, I know this sounds a little cheesy, but it was a pathway to truth. So it's a process, right? It's not just a body of knowledge, but it's a way of thinking about things and asking questions and getting answers that gives you more information. So I think, maybe I didn't think about it at the time, but now with a bit of hindsight, I think that's really what kind of drove me to that, this sort of pursuit of the truth and knowledge and asking questions and getting answers.
I love that. It is always curiosity. That's what we always tell kids. It's good to be curious and it's great to ask questions and find the answers. So after that, you were interested in science. You went to McMaster University where I met you, but then you chose medicine. Why did you take that route?
I did, because I love the science, I love the discovery part, but I'm kind of a so what person, right? So if you have that science and if you have that information, like what do you do with it? So medicine was a way of taking that science, taking that information, and I also really like people, like talking to people, and so it was a way to apply it in a way that helps them either stay healthy, or if they're sick, helps them get better. And for me, when we're looking at health, it's like the thing that has to be there before you can do anything else. So whether it's work or whether it's play or whether it's even, eat, if there's anything that needs to be done, it's kind of the thing that you need to be healthy to be able to do all of those other things. So I was really interested in it. I ended up doing pediatrics because I really, really loved working with children.
And do you think your dad had an influence? Because I know your dad's also a doctor. And funny enough, I know this because your dad delivered my first child. That's crazy.
He did. So he was actually a bit of the opposite. So my dad delivers babies, obviously. We've always lived in fairly small towns. So he's worked 7 days a week for years and years. And, on particularly difficult days, he would kind of come back and say, do anything you want, but don't do medicine. There are easier ways to live your life. But, he was really, when I just did decide to do medicine, he was absolutely really, really happy and very proud of that.
Oh, I bet. Now, how did you land this role as Chief Medical Advisor to Health Canada?
Well, it started in terms of coming into Health Canada. I finished my medical school training. I finished pediatrics. Part of that was that I did a year in exchange in Australia. So I lived there for a year, came back to Calgary where I was, finished that year. And then I decided I wanted to do a fellowship. So I was at the hospital for sick kids in Toronto in blood diseases and hematology. And then I decided to do a master's in public health. So I went down to Boston and I was really interested in international health and how that worked. So I came back to Canada and I was about to take a position in a children's hospital here in Ottawa, and ended up giving a talk. I was a lecturer as part of Grand Rounds. Somebody there met me and said that there was somebody in Health Canada that was working on something similar to what I'd been presenting. And what I'd been presenting on was medical errors in healthcare, so things that go wrong. And I ended up meeting somebody at Health Canada who was very similar to me. So he had done pediatrics, he had done hematology, he knew some of the people I worked with, and he looked at my resume and said, come and work with us for a couple of months. He goes, you can't start right away. And he goes, come work with us. If you hate it, you can leave. And if we hate you, we'll tell you to leave.
Perfect.
And so he was not what I expected a government person to be. I thought government people were like slow people, slowly pushing slow pieces of paper slowly across desks.
Right.
And he was this sort of very open, interested. So I was planning to work for Health Canada for 2 months. And that was back in 2002.
Okay, so my question was, this was pre-COVID, pre-pandemic that you signed on.
This was almost 20 years ago.
That's a long time. I didn't know that you were there that long.
Yeah, and I did. I mean, I took a little bit of a break. I worked in a university for a little bit, but most of that time I've been at Health Canada in different roles.
Okay.
So when I came back after doing some work in university, they had started this position, which was an advisor role. So what was happening is that in some of the senior levels in government, science-based organizations or health-based organizations, you would have people that were fabulous public servants, fabulous managers, but they didn't have that kind of content. They didn't have that
Right.
scientific background. So they created these advisor positions to be able to bring that to some of those decision making. So I had come back to Health Canada. I was working in another role, and then I got tapped on the shoulder by the deputy minister, who's the head of Health Canada, who asked if I wanted to also take on the role of the chief medical advisor. And that was, gosh, it was almost 5 years ago now.
Part of your roles and responsibilities right now with, of course, other people as a team are vaccines, approving vaccines for Canadians, correct?
Absolutely. So my job in general is to kind of be the person that steps back a little bit, right? So we have thousands of people at Health Canada, different teams, different groups that work together, and it's helpful sometimes to have somebody that has a little bit of that big picture to provide advice, to provide some of that coordination, that makes sure that they're familiar with all the different aspects of it. And vaccines and the vaccines approvals is part of that I'm very deeply involved in.
Okay, so then you're the perfect person for this conversation that we're about to have. Let's talk a little bit about vaccines, because I know a lot of people want to talk about this or hear your answers. Tell me how a vaccine works with using simple language. Pretend I'm a child and I don't know much, and I've asked you, Dr. Sharma, how do vaccines work?
So vaccines work by basically mimicking or doing what the body normally does when you get exposed to a germ or bacteria or virus. So what normally happens is that your body sees this virus, it recognizes it something as foreign, something that it's bad, it doesn't want it in its body, and then it goes through this process to develop the immune system to fight off that virus. Now, that takes a long time sometimes. Well, not a long time, but it takes, a couple of weeks at least. Now, if you don't have that, and you see that virus in that 2 weeks time or in that period of time, you can get pretty sick. And with COVID-19, we know that if you're in vulnerable groups, you could potentially die as well. So what vaccines do is that they kind of mimic that. It takes a part of the vaccine or part of the virus or the virus itself that's inactivated, and it shows it to the body so that the body can recognize part of that virus and then build that immune system. So that those antibodies to fight off the virus, or there's other parts of the immune system. So, and then to fight that off. So you get the vaccine, They see that in the case of COVID-19, it is the spike protein. So it's that protein on the outside of the virus. It builds up that immune system. And then the next time your body sees it, it's like, wait a minute, I recognize you. I have all of these antibodies ready, and those antibodies attack the virus, hopefully kill it, or make it that it can't make you sick.
Now, this vaccine is an mRNA vaccine. What does that mean?
So there are a number of vaccines. So when we were talking about COVID-19 and vaccines, back when it was first discovered, so the COVID-19 virus is the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and that was first genotyped back on January 10th is when it was released, on 2020, sorry. And on the 11th, people started working on vaccines. So right now, there are 4 different platforms. So 4 different types of vaccines that are being developed. There are about 160 of them in clinical trials. But right now, there are about 5 to 7 that are the ones that we're thinking, probably will make it to be able to use in humans. The first 2 out of the gate were these ones that you were talking about, these
Right.
mRNA vaccines. And they were the first mRNA vaccines that were developed that are actually being given to people to prevent disease. So that's why they're special. This is really the first, the technology's been around for a while, but it was the first preventative vaccines to use this technology.
Let's talk about variants though, because you mentioned that spike protein. And now we have these new variants from South Africa, UK, Brazil. What's the risk with these new variants?
So viruses mutate and create variants. That's just what they do. That's their job. Their whole job is to stay around as long as possible, to find hosts that they can replicate and they can live in. So we've had hundreds and hundreds of variants of this virus. And if you think about the SARS-CoV-2 virus, it does mutate. It's not the one that mutates sort of the quickest. So if we think about the flu, influenza, that is a virus that mutates a lot to the point where we actually have to develop new vaccines every single year and figure out what strains might be circulating. Then there's other viruses like measles virus that are really, really slow. So that's like years and years and years before you see a mutation. So the COVID-19 virus, the SARS-CoV-2, is kind of in the middle. It does mutate. A lot of mutations don't make a difference. So they are just something that comes and goes, and then we don't even know about them unless we're actually monitoring them. Now, we have seen variants that do make a difference. So, the 117 one that was from the UK, there's other ones as well that you've mentioned from other parts of the world. They can affect the virus to make it more transmissible, so easier to pass from one person to other. And also, there are some that can potentially make the disease that it causes more severe. So it's really important that we know about them, that we monitor for them, that we control bringing them into the country as much as possible. But the thing that is the most important is viruses, in order to mutate, need to be able to replicate. They need to be able to have a place where they're living.
Right.
And and every time, the more that there is, the more that hosts that there are, the more that they actually mutate. So the biggest thing we can do to help control these variants is to keep the numbers of cases down. And those are the public health measures, the vaccines, and all of those. So for the vaccines, we know that they have, that the first two vaccines that were out were actually pretty good against most of the variants. We know that they have some decreased activity, but they were already starting from a place where they were really, really, really high effectiveness. So we need to keep an eye on that. If we get to a point where there are variants where the vaccines are not working anymore, we go back, the companies go back, and they redesign those vaccines. So we're looking at what we're doing now. We're using the vaccines that we have that are effective against the variants. If there's variants that come up and where the vaccines are not going to be working, those will be redesigned, and we'll bring those into Canada as well.
And how do you go about letting the public know that it might seem to some people that this was rushed, but that you're still using the same rigorous measures to make sure that they're effective and safe? What do you say to the public?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, it was not rushed. We did not cut any corners. These vaccines are going through all the developmental phases that any vaccine would go through. When we're looking at them at Health Canada, we're doing the same review that we would for any other vaccines. Now, then people are saying, well, hold up, you are telling me that this is something that can take 20 years or 10 years. And now, we've got vaccines in a year and Health Canada is reviewing them quickly. So what's different? And what's different is that the way that they were developed really cut out a lot of the downtime. Like, it's amazing what can be done if you've got all of these scientists all over the world working on something together, getting the funding together to be able to do those trials. There's normally a lot of downtime when you're doing research. So you're writing grants, you're waiting for it, you do one part of a study, then there's a pause. So all of that has been compressed. So it's basically the same process, just compressed into something that's smaller. And then the same thing in Health Canada, sometimes what we do is that we actually normally wait for all of the studies to be complete before we even start looking at a vaccine. Now we're doing something called a rolling submission. So as information becomes available, companies give it to us. We look at it as it becomes available. We've got dedicated teams that are just focused on, a separate team for each virus that have about 7 to 10 people on it and they're working on that. There's no waiting time for going back and forth with the company. So we basically just taken all that time that might be waiting or, you know, things that are done one after another, and we've compressed that and things are being done all at the same time.
Yeah, so like you said, I think a lot of the red tape is gone and it's a global effort, right? Everybody is working towards the same goal. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all facing, this is one thing that we're all facing around the world at the same time that's having, you know, obviously a huge effect on our day-to-day lives.
Right, right. Now, how about a vaccine for children? Is that on the horizon?
Absolutely. So when vaccine trials are done, they start with adults, unless it's a vaccine that's just for children. But in general, we start with adults. And if you think about the phase 3 trials, so it goes through phase 1, 2, and 3. Phase 3 trials are the really large ones, tens of thousands of people. So we usually do those first for a variety of different reasons. One is that, you know, kids are not just little big people. They have their, especially when it comes to medications or vaccines, they have their own responses. And even for kids, the way that an infant, a baby would respond to a medication or a vaccine is different than a toddler, is different than somebody that's in grade school, is different than somebody that's in high school. So it's you have to take a look at all of that. Plus, you know, you want to make sure we have, you know, obviously kids. Can you imagine parents saying, yep, there's something that is completely untested, it hasn't been tested on anyone, here, give it to my kid. Right. You know, I think people want to say, here, we've got this. We've had a lot of science that's gotten to this place before it even goes, you know, into trials in humans. We have tens of thousands of adults that have been tested. Now we're going to take that information and be able to do smaller trials, so with fewer numbers of people in younger children, to make sure that it works and to make sure that there are no side effects that we would see in that group that we would. So the two major vaccines that we've already got approved in Canada, the one that's by Pfizer BioNTech and the one that's by Moderna, have already started trials in younger children. So it's going to be a little while. I think it's probably, you know, maybe summer before we would have results of those trials. It really depends on how quickly they can get participants into those trials, where one group gets the vaccine, one group does not get the vaccine.
Right.
So it really depends on all of that. But it'll be a little while, but you know, eventually we will have something that's met those standards and shown the good science to say that it's safe and effective for kids.
And why are kids, why is it different in children? They're not getting as sick when they're exposed to COVID. What are the theories behind that?
Yeah, we don't know exactly. So we know that, I mean, in general, kids tend to be a group that's healthier. We think that there also is, there's a type of receptor that's on the cell called the ACE receptor. And that is something that we think that the virus uses to get into the cells. And those receptors, kids don't have as many receptors as adults. So that's one theory about why kids might carry the virus. So you might have it on you, but you don't necessarily get really sick. Now, it's still important though, because let's say you're a kid and you're carrying the virus, you don't know because you don't have any symptoms, you feel well, but what if you can then pass it on to somebody else, you know, grandparent, somebody who has other illnesses, and potentially they can get really sick. So we have to, even though, you know, we're not seeing as many kids get sick, we still have to be really careful about making sure that, you know, it's the same things we've been talking about,
right.
Keeping distance, you know, wearing your mask, washing your hands, doing all those public measures so that it can't get spread.
The other thing that's out there is not just the coronavirus we have to worry about, it's also all this misinformation. You know, on social media, in the news, there's just so much information, misinformation and information. How do we rise above it? Like, how do we navigate through all of this on social media? What is your advice?
Oh, that's such a great question. I mean, I think, you know, technology is fabulous, right? And social media is great. Like, you think about how difficult it would be to stay connected with people or schools or work, or even, I mean, we wouldn't be able to have this conversation if that technology didn't exist. So it really is important. But you're right. I think we're seeing two pandemics. We're seeing the viral pandemic, and we're seeing this sort of pandemic of misinformation, disinformation. So, I mean, I think it's important for people to get that information, to be empowered. You have to be able to have that information to be making choices for yourself and those that are close to you. But you need to make sure that you're getting that information from trusted sources. So, you know, going to, I think Health Canada is, but there's so many people that are putting out, I think, really good quality information. But if you see something that doesn't quite make sense, or it seems like it's, really out there, then you have to kind of question that. And that's really the basis of science, right? That's that asking the questions, seeing the evidence, making sure that what you're seeing is something that's reliable and that you can trust. So, trusted sources, and making sure that you're not just accepting things, that it's healthy to ask those questions as well about what you're seeing.
Now, I want to ask you, Supriya, how is SARS and this pandemic different or similar?
I think one is that this virus, so they're all from the same sort of family.
Right,
So we've got SARS, there's MERS as well, the Middle Eastern respiratory virus. So they're from this family. And we have coronaviruses that can cause very, very mild illnesses as well. So that's kind of one of the similar things. What we're seeing with this virus is that it is more transmissible than SARS.
Mm-hmm.
So it goes from person to person more quickly. We can also, in terms of people getting the virus and not having any symptoms, so these people that are asymptomatic are still able to spread that, which is a bit different than what we saw in SARS as well. And then just the way that the virus had sort of moved around the world. So, with SARS, I think we were able to kind of track and trace it and contain it in a way that we haven't been able to with the SARS-CoV-2. Now, one of the good things about COVID is that we do have vaccines against that. So we actually never developed or never got to the point where we had a vaccine against SARS. The question would be now, as we go forward, will the SARS-CoV-2 act the way that SARS did? Because we had, a few waves, and then eventually that virus kind of disappeared.
It just went away, yeah.
Yeah. And so when COVID-19 cases first popped up, the first thought was, oh, this is SARS that's come back. And then we found out that it was actually something different. So we don't know exactly how these viruses will behave. Again, with the variants and how they're changing, that'll affect how long they're going to be around. But we think that we're going to be living with this virus for at least a few years.
Yes, I know. I've sadly had that conversation with my daughters, who are like teenagers and early 20s, and are like, this is taking a while. And it'll be a while longer. It's going to be a while longer. The other thing I've been finding really interesting, Supriya, during all of this is how many women are in the role of chief medical officers. We have, Dr. Teresa Tam, Dr. Mona Niemer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, and that's just to name a few. Why do you think we have so many women in these positions leading the country through this pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to generalize, right? I mean,
Sure.
I think we can say there's a saying that says all generalizations are false, including this one. So you have to be careful. We can't put everybody in one basket.
Yeah.
But I think one is that we are seeing, so most of those positions are physicians. I think we're seeing more women in medicine in general. I think there used to be a time where medical school classes were 80-90% men. Now I think it's actually tipped in general. Most medical classes are more women than men. But I think the other thing is that, at the core, a lot of these positions are kind of management positions. You've got big organizations, you're making decisions. They're kind of CEO type of positions. And, there is research in the business field that says you're better off if you have a female CEO and have up to 3 people or more female in your kind of higher levels of management. And the theory is that women can be, and the science is, if you have that, you have a more productive organization. And so there are some theories that because women might be more open to innovation, maybe they're more flexible in that management style, they tend to be more nurturing in their management style towards people in the organizations. So there's probably a lot of kind of capacities, competencies in women that really serve people well. I think one of the things is about the ability to multitask and do a lot of different things at the same time. And again, not to say that men and boys don't have that, but in general, if you look at women, I think there's some skills that really, bring forward a person that can take on this role and do it really well.
Supriya, what does this job mean to you personally?
You know what, I think I mentioned I'm a so what person, right? And so I think in terms of my kind of background and history kind of getting here, there's some teachers that have really played a very important role. When I was doing my master's, I had this a teacher. He was kind of this kind of crusty older guy who gave us in one of my classes a speech, and he said, you know, I don't care what it took for you guys to get here, right? And so it was at the Harvard School of Public Health, and he said, I don't care what it takes, whatever you had to deal with in your life, whatever obstacles you had to kind of overcome, I don't care, because you are ridiculously privileged to be here compared to so many other people that didn't have that opportunity. And your job now is to take this knowledge and take this experience that you have and make sure that it makes a difference, that it helps people. Right? He was really rough. He would just be saying, I don't want to hear that you're out there and you changed like the crystals of one color from blue to green or something. I want to make sure that you taking this information, you take that responsibility and you make a difference. And I think, you know, in terms of Health Canada, I'm not seeing patients anymore, but I kind of feel like I have, you know, it's like over 30 million patients. And a lot of that time, the work that we do at Health Canada goes on in the background. You know, people don't know every time you take a medication or there's, you know, you go into a hospital and you've got even the beds or anything like that. Those are those things that, you know, Health Canada approves. But this was a situation, you know, with the vaccines where here's something that's facing us all. It basically stopped the planet. And we've taken all of this science, developed these vaccines. We've got these teams that are here that you know worked really hard. The teams have been working flat out to approve them, and then it goes into someone's arm. And it goes into someone's arm, and it potentially saves their life.
Right.
It saves the life of somebody else. So I can't think of a better way to have taken, you know, this whole journey, all of this knowledge, and make it really concrete. Like this is something that's happening now. And, you know, when friends of mine sent me some, you know, photos when they were getting vaccinated, and I got emotional. I mean, it's, you know, I know that they're going back into hospitals where, you know, some of them are at the epicenter of the pandemic, or they're volunteering in places taking care of people. And so it was the, so what? Well, so what? Here we've got something that's being used right away that is a marvel of science, right? That is just was unimaginable a year ago, and it's actually happening. So, you know, it means a lot. But I think it also means that we still have a lot of work to do. It gives meaning to what it is that, you know, all the education, all the work that I've done. So it's really important. And, you know, when you're working, you spend more time working than you do anything else in your life, more than sleeping, more than your free time, more than your weekends. So it has to be something that you really enjoy doing. Then it doesn't feel like work. So it means a lot.
Yeah. What a wonderful answer, actually. That was so beautifully said. And I can't wait to roll up my sleeve and get my vaccine.
I know I've had friends that have said, you know, listen, if I had to take it in my eyeball, I would take it. Now, not everybody is like that, right? There are people that have a lot of questions about it, and that's normal and understandable too. Absolutely, ask the questions. But I want people to know that the process has been really, really rigorous. You know, we would not approve a vaccine unless it's been shown to, you know, to meet those standards. It doesn't mean that there are no side effects. All medications, all vaccines potentially have side effects, but it, you know, has met those standards. And if you have an opportunity when it is your time, you know, really want people to roll up their sleeves and get vaccinated.
Supriya, thank you so much. It was so great to see you again and touch base. And thank you for all the work that you and everybody at Health Canada does. I really appreciate you talking with us today.
Oh, and thank you, Betty. This is a great initiative. I hope if we can inspire people to get interested in science, and it's so varied. There's so many different areas. If that's what works for you, and that's something that you're interested in, you know, to know that there are a lot of opportunities there, and it's a fantastic field to be in.
It sure is. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Well, thanks so much for joining me once again on Spotlight with Scientists in School. If you would like to find out more information about all our programming, our community, and our classroom workshops, which are now virtual, our 4-week STEM club, or programs like Party Like a Scientist, please check out our website, scientistinschool.ca. And of course, we have all the rest: Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. We are new to Instagram. Our handle is @sci_in_school. Thanks so much for joining me, and we'll see you next time on Spotlight.